And welcome to another vlog. In this vlog, I will be continuing the process of making a history-bounding version of this round gown by Simplicity / American Duchess in this lovely spotted cotton from Burnley and Trowbridge. Previously, you saw me make the Regency short stays out of things in my stash and make the mock-up for the bodice for this and do some modifications. I had to do a full bust adjustment. And now, since you last saw me, which was last week for you, but is just earlier today, I have had another 3 cups of tea, eaten dinner, gone for a walk, put the tiny human to bed, and read the instructions. If you recall, I am using fabric pattern pieces from where I had to make the full bust adjustment and test it. I'm also using some paper pattern pieces from where I transferred the paper pattern. I also now have more space. Zach just put his desk back. He's still working, he's still organizing, but that's cool. But what that means is I should be able to create enough space on the table to where I can cut out my pattern pieces. And I am going to cut out the skirt pieces first because I've figured out the dimensions that I want for them. And then I will cut out the bodice pieces and the lining pieces. And then we will address the instructions and the changes that I think I'm going to be making to the instructions. But first, it's very wrinkly, so I need to iron it. I don't know if I got it on footage, but I miscut one of the skirt pieces. It's long enough for my natural waist, but I needed more length from the Empire waist. So I had this 30-inch piece of fabric, and I was determined that I was going to play fabric pattern piece Tetris. So I'm getting my sleeve and all of my exterior bodice pieces out of this miscut. I'm going to cut these out and mark them. I have the skirt panels over there. One of them needs to get cut in half. And then I need to cut out the lining fabric. Cut lining pieces of this and this. I'm not cutting a lining piece for the sleeve. And the front lining piece that I started with doing the bust adjustment. And happy Tuesday. I wanted to check in because I did consult my American Duchess Guide to 18th Century Dressmaking, and while it doesn't sound like this would be particularly helpful with a Regency gown, this gown is actually an 1890s gown, as I have said before, and it is the round gown, which American Duchess, and they put it in their book, and look at that. That's just, is so beautiful. So I have consulted this, and they are flatlining the back pieces. So I am going to flatline my pieces. I'm not doing it like this because they do it by hand. No. No. So I'm going to flatline my pieces, and they do all of the bodice construction before they even touch the skirts. So I am going to do that. But yeah, it appears that these are similar instructions. The skirt pieces are pretty similar. But I'm going to look at their skirt instructions and probably follow those. I'm also going to look at their drawstring instructions and probably follow those. There's a center front opening on this. They do that with a rolled hem by hand. I will probably also do that just because that's like the one thing that I will do by hand. Everything else I'm just going to probably use their methods and do the machine sewing. I'm distracted. Oh, and then there's a sash. There's a fancy sash to go with your dress. Anyway, Zach is home. We need to discuss where we are running about this morning. So I thought I would check in with our list here. I've created a new list, and I realized I hadn't done anything with this list. So we have transferred and cut the pattern, cut, sew, and fit the mock-up. We have altered the pattern. We have cut the lining. We have cut the fashion fabric. And the next step is to flatline the bodice pieces, but that will have to wait until we return home. It is later in the day. It's about 1:20. 1:20 already? Zach and I have successfully run errands. I am full of sushi and I'm happy. Drinking a Diet Coke. I'm going to flatline these pieces, start the assembly process. I think I've decided I am going to do the sleeves with a French seam down the side just because I think that'll hold up better to fraying. And there was enough ease in the sleeve pattern to where I think that'll be just fine. I'm flatlining the bodice pieces. I think the other bodice pieces I'm going to fell. But yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. If I can get the filling and assemble the bodice done and maybe assemble the sleeves, this should be in a good spot. So the flatlining is done, and I've marked all my pieces. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the stay stitching, and that like goes around the neckline to make sure that doesn't stretch since it's cut on the bias. And I'm going to do the sleeve gathering, and then I'm going to French seam the sleeves, and then I'm going to assemble the bodice pieces. So right now I have front piece and the front lining piece, and I'm going to do the stay stitching on the front piece, and then I'm going to do the stay stitching on this piece, and then these two pieces, and then I will do the darts on these two pieces, and I will do the hems on the front opening edge and the neckline on this piece. Sorry, it occurred to me that I was showing you a proprietal pattern. I shouldn't do that. I'm going to stay stitch the straps, and then I'm going to sew the darts on the lining, hem the neckline edge of the inside piece, and then I will use the two front pieces and attach them to the back pieces. And then the sleeves. Like, I should have all of the bodice pieces attached before I put the skirts together. The skirts are not going to take long. What's going to take the longest is the front opening bit, because I have to cut a slit in the fabric and then do a rolled hem, and I think I'm going to do that by hand because I can probably do a finer job on that by hand than by machine. But we can go over to the board. Ba-da-da-da! Whoops. Flatline bodice pieces. Hooray! We're getting there. Alright. Gathering stitches are in the tops of the sleeves. The initial seam is sewn. I'm sewing the sleeves with French seams. So these are sewn wrong sides together. And then I'm going to press this open, flip it over, press it flat, sew it with right sides together, encasing this raw edge here. So now I'm going to take care of the sleeves and start assembling the back of the bodice. Oh, and everything is stay stitched. And it just needs hemming. So I'm going to get a bunch of things together to sew and then go back over to the machine and sew them. Good morning. It is Wednesday. And I did some work and I realized this morning this is the front, the right side. This is the dart flap. So I have to go redo the darts. And normally I'd be like, well, I'll just turn the hem the other way and switch the pieces. But I've already done the hem. And I'm not undoing the hem. But I have the hem / drawstring channel sewn on the front. I've sewn the hem on the very front of the outer piece. And these don't get darts, so it's fine. And I have 2 finished sleeves that are ready to be set into the bodice. I have just attached one of the side back pieces to the back piece. I'm gonna press it and make sure it came out right, and then I'm gonna show you what I did, because sewing curved seams can be tricky. But yeah, so I'm gonna plug the iron in, eat some breakfast while I wait for that to heat up, and unpick these darts. It's awesome. It's fine. It's fixable. Better to realize it now than realize it later. There's the microwave yelling at me that my breakfast is ready. I'll check in a little bit to show you how to sew curved seams. So I may not be able to sew a dart yesterday, but this morning I could sew a curved seam. Sometimes you just suck at the thing that you've been doing forever and it's just a bad day. But you can kind of see there is a seam line here, but it's not super obvious. If it was like a stripe or whatever, then it would be obvious, and that's the seam right here. And I got it to ease and stretch and lay basically flat. There is no puckering or weirdness. So I am going to show you how I did this. So here's my curved piece. And this is the frowny piece. And this is the smiley piece. And for this, you want the smiley piece on top, because this is the one that's going to have to stretch and ease. And this is also the one that's potentially going to get wrinkled. So you want this one on top so you can see what it's doing. This one is going to lie flat. So this one can go on the bottom. And it's going to go on the bottom in the sewing machine. And yes, I did manage somehow. I'm not even sure what that is. To get brown stuff on my white project. There's a tiny human with dirty fingers who runs around, and this was out, so who knows? Who knows? That could be cinnamon roll. So, I'm trying to make sure you can see this, the frown piece, and you lay it out. And then the frown piece is on the bottom. And the smile piece goes on top of it. And then what they say to do in the American Duchess book is to line up the bottom edge first and pin this way, so that you have a flat, evenly lined up bottom edge to move up from. Because presumably there's a little bit more wiggle room at the shoulder if that is needed. But you want your bottom seam to line up because it's where you're matching up your skirts. This is the corner you want to make sure is flush with the bottom. This is part of the seam allowance. So I line that up there. And pin. And then, so I'm eating the elephant one bite at a time. This pattern has a notch, so I line up the notches in the middle. So this lines up there. And this is one of the reasons, I know it's not necessarily conventional, but this is one of the reasons that I do jutting out notches. It's because this is easier than if I had clipped into the seam allowance. This is just easier for me to see the line up. It uses a little bit more fabric, it generates a little bit more waste, it makes your scraps a little weird, but in situations like this, I feel like it's worth it. And then you can see this doesn't want to go together, so I'm going to have to stretch the top layer a little bit which is why it's on the bias, because, you know, they expect you to need to do this. And pin, and stretch, and pin. And I use a lot of pins to do this, because that's how you make sure that it's doing what you want it to. That's what that looks like. And you can see how this is wanting to wrinkle up. And you can see how, like, if I put this through the sewing machine this way, I wouldn't be able to see what it was doing on the bottom and if it was wrinkling. And now I'm gonna line up this top edge. And again, there's the little flat bit, that's seam allowance. So that is lining up with the edge there. And then again, you've got the weird gapey situation, so you're gonna have to see how it doesn't wanna line up. And this is what it means when it says ease. Ease in. You have to kind of manipulate it and stretch it. I didn't know the term for this for a really long time. I didn't know a lot of the sewing terms for a really long time because I learned to sew when I was 5 from my grandma, and she didn't teach me the terminology because I was 5. Easing. I knew that you were supposed to do this on curved seams. I didn't know what it was called. Moral of the story is things are not as hard as they seem, and sometimes you know how to do them already. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine now and sew it again, the frowning side down on the feed togs, and the smiling side, it's now frowning because it's been eased to fit the frown, up, so I can make sure everything comes out flat and beautiful, and hope that this comes out as good as the other one and I didn't just waste all of my sewing mojo. I think I just sewed that whole seam without filming it, but let's see how it came out. Looks pretty good. Alright, let's take it over to the iron and see. Y'all, I think that came out better than the first one. I got a little off on my seam allowance there. This one is pretty perfect. Other than not pattern matching, which on this fabric I'm not going to bother with. And I don't know that I would bother with necessarily anyway. Yeah, on a curved seam, that sounds awful. So, now, on to the rest. And we're back. It looks like a different day, but it's not. Before I left, I did do the hem on the bottom, redid the darts properly, and I have realized something. The way that they finish the neckline in this pattern is by attaching the lining and the fashion fabric that I flatlined. So I think what's going to happen is I am going to be finishing the neckline, this back bit here, with bias tape, and then I am going to look it over and think about it while I attach the skirts together, because the instructions tell me that I need to attach the 2 side pieces to the back piece, and then I need to attach the front pieces of the skirt to the front pieces of the bodice, because the front pieces of the bodice and the skirt at the underbust point, which is the waistline, they gather with 1/8 of an inch wide. It's supposed to be twill tape. I have this pink ribbon. This is an unintentional stash busting project. I'm not going to buy 1/8 of an inch wide twill tape. So I'm going to work on the skirt pieces and think about how I'm going to do the back. Alright friends, I have laid out the skirt panels. This is a lot of skirt. It is 2/3 of what this skirt will be. It's the 2 side panels and the back panel. All of that skirt gets gathered down into just the back part of this, because the front panel is the only one that's on the drawstring. Such floof. such floof in my future. I flatlined the front bodice pieces together along all the edges except for where the drawstring is, and the front and the very bottom, because that's where I'm attaching this to the skirt. And then I pinned it all up on Daisy, and this is kind of the look you're gonna get-ish, a very rough approximation. It'll have sleeves, but I like the gathering up here. I think that's cute. It's gonna have another drawstring here to make the gathering come together. And then this is the front panel of the skirt. Part of why I pinned this up here was so that it didn't get confused with this, because I was flat filling this seam by hand. It took me about an hour and a half, but I was chatting. So I'm gonna do this one. And now what I'm gonna do is this step, which is to slice this open and do a rolled hem around here so that I can attach this to the bodice. And I am going to flatline the other bodice piece. I've decided that to finish the back neck edge, I have a piece somewhere around here, a piece of bias tape. It's like just long enough. The only part of the back that isn't going to be finished is this. So I'm going to stitch some bias tape to this and finish it before I attach this seam. And then this bottom edge, or when the bodice is attached to the skirt, it will be on the inside. And then the armhole obviously will go inside the sleeve. So all of that will be finished. And that is where we are. I'm really excited about this. I think it's really cute. I think it's going to be super, super fun. Please excuse the tiny human noises in the background. It is bedtime, but she is not sleeping. But I wanted to check in and show you what I have been working on. I have the front panel of the skirt here, and this has a drawstring opening, so I just cut down 10 inches as it instructed me to do in the book. And then a rolled hem. I've never done this before. Let me see if it'll focus. You can tell I've never done this before because it's not great. Like, this is the end that I just did. It looks a lot better. It's a lot more even. The stitches are a lot more invisible on this side, but this is how we learn. I think the next step is to attach this to the front bodice piece to create that drawstring channel. The shoulder straps and attach the back skirt. So I attach the front skirt to the front panel and the back skirt panels to the back. Attach that to the bodice, back of the bodice, and then I just do the side seam and then insert the sleeves, because that's how the instructions tell me to do it. And I will be hand felling all of the seams in the bodice. They want them encased in the lining, but that didn't make sense to me with this fabric. I also have my strings for the drawstring at the neckline and at the waist. So that is there. Hopefully I can get this to a spot where I can try it on. End of the night check-in. Here's what I got done. Here is the back of the dress. I sewed some twill tape to finish that edge. Hand sewing along those. I put some bias tape there to finish the neck edge. I assembled front of the dress. I need to attach the shoulder seam and the entire side seam. I have one more string left to thread, but you can see how ruched it will be. Ta-da! There's the shoulder seam. It's gonna just, yeah, that's where we are for the evening. I need to wrap up my things, but I will see you tomorrow. Morning check-in. It is Thursday morning. I just took Emma to school. Zach feels like death warmed over post second vaccine. So he is in bed, so I just took him to school. But I wanted to show you what I did last night because I'm really happy with it. But I put the dress on the dress form and I'm really pleased. This is how it will look. I need to sew up the side seams and the shoulder seams and attach the sleeves and do the hem. And then I'll need to do hand finishing on the inside of the bodice, but that's fine. So let's come over here. Did attach the skirts to the bodice. Attach the skirt to the bodice. I haven't attached the sleeves yet. I haven't finished attaching the bodice yet. Let's see how long it takes us. Once I get the side seams and the shoulder seams done, I'm gonna try it on just to make sure it fits before I attach the sleeves and do the hem. And I'm gonna machine sew the hem because I did machine sewing along here. Look at that beautiful sunlight. Yeah. And that's visible machine stitching, so I don't really care. It's so hard to tell on this fabric. But then I went and I hand felled the seams on the back. And I hand stitched down the waistband, and you can see, let me see if I can find it. I can't even find them now. Some of my stitches are more visible than others, but I'm really happy with it. I really like the way that the back looks. It gives exactly the drape I was hoping for. I'm just in love with this. Alright, so we've done a try on for fit. I think it looks good. One tiny problem is the string on this side apparently wasn't stitched in very good because it popped out. But on this side, it looks good. And it ties here. And I thought this opening here would be super obvious, but it just folds over on itself. The back fits nicely. I am really pleased with this. Now to fix the ribbon, attach the sleeves, and do the hem. And then I can do all the interior finishings. So, it is done with the exception of making some adjustments here. Somehow this is too high. And finishing the seams in the sleeves. But I'm super happy with this. My one regret, yes, and I'm trying this on with pajama pants. My one regret is that it doesn't have pockets. But to put the pockets in the waist seam, they'd have to be like here, and that's not accessible. Draw on where it needs to be cut down and refold that over. But otherwise, I'm stoked. I'm so thrilled. I can now, when it's warm again, I can now go frolic through the field and live my best Lizzie Bennett life. I'm so happy. Alright, I'm gonna make that adjustment and I'm just gonna like flip that over and hand sew that. I'll have to move this closure. I apparently didn't do the full bust adjustment enough. I'm gonna see if adjusting this actually fixes the fit issue. Yeah, this is how much I need to move the bottom closure, because what's happening is it's not tight enough at the bottom, and so this top bit is rising up. So I don't actually think I need to adjust it if I can get it to stay where it needs to be. Because the hook and eye closure goes at the under bust point. I don't know, maybe like a waist tape, something to hold it where it belongs. I'm gonna go attempt that, and I'm gonna back up so you can see this look. Ugh. Stays, shift, PJ pants, slippers, and then I got cold, so ta-da! That's the look I've been rocking today. Sewing room slob. Also, it occurs to me that I have been so absorbed in sewing and watching my show that I've only had 2 cups of tea today. What is wrong with me? It's basically done. I'm so in love. I was able to move the closure and that resolved this issue. It's a little lower than I had hoped, but that just means I didn't do enough for the full bust adjustment. But it's not indecent. I love the length. I love how swooshy and light it is. I am wearing my shift under it because if I wasn't wearing my shift, you would definitely be able to see my leg and everything. So, but it's long enough to where the shift works, and I have to wear the shift with the stays. I don't have to, but I should wear the shift with the stays anyway. And I fit this over the stays and not over a modern bra, so here we are. I am actually gonna go find, I have a ribbon that I think would go quite nicely with this that's upstairs. I'm gonna go find that and tie that and see if that completes the look.